Welcome to Sacred Magic. Violet is on a quest to bring sacredness back into our everyday experiences. Anyone can have an extraordinary life when they are able to tap into their sacred magic within. Violet and her guests will be sharing their divine passions, inspirations, and stories of connecting with their sacred magic. We are so happy you have joined us today. Let's get started with your host, the magical creator of Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, Violet Rain.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Magic Podcast. I'm your host, and my guest today is Jennifer Clair. She is an evolutionary astrologer and spiritual counselor who believes that the more we surrender to what shows up, the more magical life can be. Jennifer never chose astrology as a profession, but she allowed it to enter her life at a time when she was questioning what to do. Having an open mind and trusting the unknown is what got her into the career that she feels passionate about today. Jennifer always believed that she didn't have to know what her title would be. She just had to be willing to say yes when the universe presented her with an opportunity. The moment came in 2020 when her astrologer suggested professional astrology as an option. After professional training and certification, she now counsels people one-on-one to help them find direction through their own birth chart. So welcome, Miss Jennifer.
Thank you, Violet. It's wonderful to be here.
So I love your story in the beginning. So I assume that you would seek out astrologers to find out your birth chart, and that's kind of where this led you. So share a little bit of that story with us.
Yeah, so before I even knew about astrology, I had a spiritual mentor. I was about 17 years old working on a horse farm in Illinois, and she was really open-minded, a very mystical lady, and she just allowed me to believe that anything is possible, and she helped me understand the law of attraction and what you think about you attract. And so if I wouldn't have had the spiritual mentor when I was young, I don't know if I would have been as open to astrology as a profession later on. But then skip ahead a few years, I'm working in a natural grocers, and the manager has created an astrology chart for me, and he gave me a book which sat on my shelf for 12 years before I even opened it, called Planets in Transit by Robert Hand. And so astrology was sprinkled in throughout my life. And then eventually I was at a crossroads. I was between jobs, and I was speaking with my personal astrologer, and she suggested astrology as a profession. And that is when I said, you know what, I've tried everything else, so let's give this a shot and see what happens. And the universe must have wanted me to go that direction, because all the doors opened, and I was doing reading for friends and family, and then eventually clients, and now I have a business. So
I love
I'm really
that.
happy.
I absolutely love that. I'm not one that goes very often and gets astrology readings. So I couldn't wait to talk to you today about astrology and how it can be utilized. Because for some of us, we would go and get an astrology reading, and I know that I'm Capricorn and I'm Aries and I'm Virgo. Now, Capricorn is my main one. I don't actually know where my Virgo and my Aries are. But my daughter keeps telling me those are all action signs. So now we understand why you're so driven in your life. That if those are your signs, they are very driven in the world. So that's about as much as I know about astrology. So talk to us a little bit about, because I love you share with us that you can find awareness, self-awareness through astrology. So share a little bit of some examples of what does that mean? What can our astrology chart really show us about ourselves?
So when you're looking at your astrology chart, your natal chart, I first wanted to mention that I believe being self-aware is just being mindful. So when you have mindfulness, you're able to be present, you're able to absorb the information that you're learning. And so when you're ready to absorb the information from your astrology chart, what you will see is there's 10 planets if you include the sun and the moon, and each one of them tells you something about your makeup. So Mercury, for example, your Mercury sign is how your mind works, how you think and how you learn. So that's a really important sign to know about yourself, especially when you're communicating with your partner or your boss. Another one would be Venus. Venus is going to show us how you love, what your aesthetic tastes are, and what you really value in life. And then your moon sign is your emotional being. So, how do you react emotionally when hard situations come up in your life or when good situations come up? All of these planets are significant to different parts of you. They're like little sub-personalities, and they each have an agenda. So the more you know about what that is for you, you can act upon them. And I believe your life moves more harmoniously and you're more accepting of things and you just have more peace of mind.
So is your birth chart fixed? Like it doesn't move,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, but the planets move. So, as planets move and as there shifts, are there changes and things that are happening in our lives, like from year to year? Like an astrologer could look at your chart and say, okay, this year, this could be some of the challenges or opportunities. Is that how it works?
Yes, absolutely. And what you're referring to is a planetary transit chart. So astrologers will look at the natal chart and then they'll look at the planetary transit chart on top of the natal chart. And that tells them where are the moving planets in the sky affecting me in my life right now, personally.
I love that. I love that because I know I have friends of mine that love to tap into an astrology reading almost every year to kind of get an idea of what that year may have in store for them, whether that's challenges or blessings or opportunities, what it
Yep.
can show. And so I would assume that those moving planets share with us a little bit of what's changing.
Yeah, so real quick, I'll just mention there is something called the solar return chart, which is a birthday chart reading, and it shows us themes for the year ahead, which is different than an actual transit chart because it's calculated differently based on the specific placement of your sun sign at the time of your birth. So I'll just give you a very quick example. If you had your sun at 3 degrees of Aquarius, then when it's at 3 degrees of Aquarius, let's just say 20 years later on your 20th birthday, then you're going to be having that solar return at that time, but it might not be the same day. So that was a little confusing. I just wanted to emphasize that a solar return chart shows you the themes for the year ahead, whereas a transit chart shows you actual planets in the sky at the moment and can also predict what areas of life you're going to be impacted in. So Uranus moves into the seventh house of marriage. There's a lot of change in marriage. You might want more independence. You might want more freedom. You might want more space, or your partner wants that, and you have to learn to adapt.
I love that. I love that. So you also talk about getting self um, validation through astrology. So is that when we come to an astrologer and we say, "Hey, I feel like I'm struggling with this," or "I feel like I'm moving uphill with this"? Is this showing in my chart? Is there something I can do differently to make this a little easier?
Yes, the first thing is to accept it and to surrender to it because you can't really fight what is going on in your life. Saturn is a perfect example. Saturn shows us our worthy work or where we have challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as we face them head on and not run from them, we actually get rewards later on. So our hard work pays off. So, yes, the chart can show your challenges, and the astrology chart is validating simply because when you know how you're meant to act, and who you're meant to be, you stop trying to be something you're not.
I love that because I tell people a lot of times when we're met with an opportunity or a challenge, it's our reaction to it that makes the difference. And if you can move through that storm, right? Move
Yeah.
through it with grace and surrender to it. The other side always has gifts on the other side, whether those are lessons that we've learned or experiences or just that we've completed something that we needed to do. There are definitely gifts on the other side if we can just look for that. So it's kind of saying the same thing in just a different way. So I'm
Yeah,
constantly telling people if you can move through these opportunities and challenges, there's always blessings on the other side that we may not be able to see until we go through those, right? You know,
absolutely.
we talk a lot about surrender and trust sometimes, and that's hard in a physical reality. We can find that difficult to go surrender,
Yeah,
surrender, trust. But the reality is, there's a lot of that within our lives. The more that we can trust and kind of surrender to the moment, the more that we can lean in and gain from the experience. So I
Hmm.
love how you talk about that. You also talk about becoming empowered through astrology. How can we
Yes.
use astrology to feel like we're more empowered in our lives?
So before I answer that question, I want to give the reader or the audience two books about surrendering that might be helpful. One
Okay.
is The Surrender Experiment, and the other one is The Presence Process by Michael Brown. So both of those will help you understand why surrendering can actually be really good and how you can become more mindful in your daily life through meditation.
I love that. I'm going to ask you to email those to me after the
I will.
call because what I'll do is I'll add it to the description today when I post and edit stuff so that people can just look in the description and find those two books because now I'm interested in both of those books because
Yeah.
I'm a book queen. I
Yeah.
love books.
Yes, me too. Okay, I will certainly send them to you. And to answer your question about how astrology is empowering, it's empowering because it gives you confidence and conviction to follow your dreams and fulfill your purpose. So when you have your chart in front of you, you have the instructions. All you have to do is learn how to read it or have it translated by an astrologer. And then you're able to know what tendencies you're here to leave behind and what qualities you're here to develop. And evolutionary astrology believes you have free will. It's not like you have to become a doctor or a lawyer. You can do whatever you want. But if you have, let's say, your North Node in Capricorn, you're really good at running a business. You're really business minded and business focused. Whereas if you have your North Node in Cancer, which I'll talk to you about in a moment, that could mean you're more nurturing and you're more emotionally in tune, and you could be a caregiver or a nurse or so many other things.
I love that. I love that insight, right? Depending
Yeah.
on what your sign is. I like
Yeah.
that.
The North Node and the South Node are just they're points on the chart that astrologers look at to help determine your purpose and where you're going, and then your gifts where you've gone away from.
So, how often would you recommend somebody go do an astrology reading? And what are the different aspects that you would recommend at different times in our lives that could be helpful?
Yeah, so how many times is really dependent on the person and the situation they're going through. So everyone goes through certain situations, like Saturn return will always happen around age 29. Uranus opposition will always happen early to mid 40s, and Chiron return will always happen around 50. So there's these very significant times in life when you're going through major changes. But overall, I would recommend at least one time a year because you're always going to want to see what themes are coming up for me this next year. What do I need to be focused on, and where do I need to put my energy? And beyond that, if you are going through a transition, anywhere from 2 to 4 times in a year.
Wow. I love that. I love that insight. I think that's really awesome. So, how can life become more easier by using astrology? And I think you've shared a little bit
Yeah.
just by being aware of what's in our chart, but share a little bit more with us.
So one thing that really stands out when I look at a chart and I see a lot of empty spaces, that means that person doesn't have a lot of energy or focus in those areas of life. So their life can become easier if they learn, oh, I'm not supposed to worry as much about my domestic family life, but I am supposed to focus on my career. And then they're no longer hard on themselves for the fact that they haven't had children or haven't had a family. Same thing could go for marriage. If the marriage house is empty, if the children's house is empty, it doesn't mean you're not going to get married or have kids, but it can tell you, oh, I don't have to put as much focus here because I've got way more lessons to learn in communication and speaking, for example.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. And when you look at my chart, it's all over here. This over here is
Okay.
completely
Oh,
empty. Everything's sitting like on this side of the chart. So I'm a one-sided
interesting.
chart. I'll just name it.
Yeah, well, that means something too. There's a lot of self-actualization and focus on your own personal growth on one side, and there's a lot of learning through relationships on the other side.
Oh,
So
that's
depending
very
on
cool.
which side it is, yeah.
I love that. I love that. So much fun learning about astrology and how it can come. So one of my other guests that I have on here quite a bit does astrology, and I had her look at my chart, but we also talked about the cycles that are coming in compared, this year to next year, because there's always planet shifts happening on the planet with our planets and our moons and our energies happening. So
Yeah.
energy is kind of cycling through for 2025. So as an
Yeah.
astrologer, I'm sure you've looked at just the movement next year and the planet. So what are you
Mhm.
seeing for 2025 from a personal
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah, from a personal perspective, well, it's funny you ask it that way because I will have Pluto conjunct my sun by the end of 2025. And that only happens once every 248 years. So not a lot of people have that aspect. I'm an Aquarius and Pluto is now an Aquarius. But I would say collectively, what that means for all of us is we want to be looking to where do we have Pluto in our chart, and where are we either using our power constructively or destructively? Are you allowing people to walk all over you or are you walking all over others? You need to make sure you're using your power wisely and helpfully out in society. And really, you are the change, right? Be the change you wish to see in the world. That's the motto, because we can't change the larger things that are happening around us. And that's why I come back to the idea of mindfulness and meditation, because if you get an anxiety, you're only going to attract more of that negativity. You need to be in a calm, peaceful state, but recognize you do have power and figure out where you need to activate it more and use it more responsibly.
I love that aspect, right? Because the truth is we can only change ourselves. We can't change other people in our lives. We can't change the collective. But I do believe we can influence the collective with the more and more of us that step in to that divine light or that peacefulness or that joy aspect. We can
Yeah.
definitely have an impact overall on the collective. And that's what our work, right? So
Mhm.
when we think about our personal journey and our personal work, how are we reacting to things in our lives? What triggers us? How can we move through that different? And are we reflecting back on our daily life or our weekly life or our monthly life so that we can do things a little bit different? Because I think that's where growth comes in, is
Yeah.
as we look and really are aware of our reactions and what's happening in our life. It allows us to personally and spiritually grow, which I think
Mhm.
is super, super important. Whether we're using astrology, whether we're using quantum human design or human design, all of these are tools and aspects that help us. I'm one of those that I came from a business world and I love taking all these like
Mhm.
assessments to figure out how I am put together and what are some of the aspects. And astrology is one of those great tools that can really benefit and help guide us. So I love your aspects that you've shared with us, your perspectives on these different things to
Yeah.
allow people. So share with us, Jennifer, what are some of the things that you offer that people can reach out and connect with you on?
Yeah, so I offer one-on-one readings on Zoom, and I do natal chart readings, I do planetary transit chart readings, and I do children's chart readings, which is basically the same thing as a natal chart reading, but it allows the parent to sit down and learn more about their child. And then compatibility readings, which I really love because another benefit to learning astrology is it helps you learn how to love others the way they need to be loved and also respect your own boundaries in love. So those are some of my favorite readings, the compatibility readings. And um, as far as other services, I teach classes in my community. I'm working on some classes to launch online, and you can find free videos on YouTube.
I love that. I love that. Child readings. Imagine as a parent how helpful that could be to see your child's chart, to see the aspects of them that you may not understand and get a better understanding of this beautiful being that's come into your life. I love that. And the compatibility of how these two people can work better together, understand each other a little bit more. I
Yeah.
really, I really think that's an awesome tool to have in a relationship or as a parent. So thanks
Yeah.
for sharing all this with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here.
Absolutely. And I do have a final offering just for our listeners. Thank you for being here. And if you go to my website and you are on my services page, you can use a discount code podcast15. It's all caps podcast, and that will be $15 off a reading of your choice.
I love that. Thank you so much for that offer. I really appreciate that. Thank you for listening today and being with us. I hope you'll follow, comment, and like us on your favorite channels. And I hope you'll come back and listen to some of our future episodes. We wish you a sacred and magical week and hope to see you soon. So happy holidays for those that are going through the holidays. This will release early January, but that is still the holiday season. So I hope that you have an amazing, amazing holiday. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us. To find out more about Violet, head over to discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. You can also send a personal message to Violet through email, violet@discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. If you love the show, subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Until next time, remember, we are meant to have abundant and joyful lives. We hope to see you soon at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.